right? My friends, there are moments in life when it feels as though heaven has gone silent, when your prayers seem unanswered, when your efforts go unnoticed, right? And when the world passes you by. But I want to tell you something today with all the conviction of my soul. Brett, God has not forgotten you. When life pushes you into the shadows, when it seems like no one notices your effort or your faith, Brett, that is when God is watching you most closely. Sometimes God hides His chosen ones, not because He has forgotten them, but because He is preparing them, Brett. Many of you have been wondering why doors have not opened, why recognition hasn't come, or why others have been elevated while you remain in obscurity, right? But the truth is this: the waiting room of God is never wasted space. There is a reason He has kept you hidden, right? There is a reason He has allowed you to walk through quiet seasons. God often hides His greatest treasures until the appointed time. Before David ever held a crown, he held a harp. Before he was known as a king, he was simply a shepherd boy on the backside of Bethlehem's hills, caring for sheep that didn't even belong to him, right? While his brothers stood tall before the prophet Samuel, confident and ready to be chosen, David wasn't even invited to the ceremony. Forgotten by his family, right? Ignored by the crowd, yet seen by God. When Samuel looked at the sons of Jesse, he thought he saw kings among them. They were strong, they were impressive, right? They were experienced. But God whispered something that echoes through every generation. Man looks at the outward appearance, right? But the Lord looks at the heart. What people overlook, God examines. What people dismiss, God designs. Some of you are in that same place right now, overlooked, underestimated, uninvited. You see others being celebrated while you serve quietly in the shadows. And perhaps you said to yourself, has God forgotten me? No, my friend, He hasn't. You're exactly where He wants you to be. The same God who anointed David in secret will anoint you in your season of obscurity. Right? God's plan for you is not canceled because people didn't recognize your value. He doesn't need human approval to fulfill divine purpose. Right? Joseph was forgotten in a prison, yet God remembered him. Elijah hid by a brook while ravens fed him, yet God sustained him. Right? Moses tended sheep in the desert for 40 years before God spoke to him from the burning bush. You see, God knows how to find you no matter where you are. Right? You don't have to strive to be seen. You have to stay faithful where you are. In those hidden places, God is shaping you. He's teaching you humility, obedience, and trust. When you think nothing is happening, everything is happening, He's building strength in your spirit, endurance in your soul, and wisdom in your mind. Because when your moment of revelation comes, you won't just be visible, you'll be ready, right? The crown came to David because the heart of a king was formed in the pasture. The palace was never the training ground, the field was. So don't despise small beginnings. Don't grow weary when the spotlight doesn't shine your way. God knows how to promote you without your help, right? He knows how to send the right people to find you. When it's time, He will send your Samuel, someone who will see what others overlooked, right? Someone who will call you forward when it looks like the world has passed you by. And when that moment comes, there will be no confusion about how it happened. Right? You'll know it wasn't your connections, your influence, or your ability. It was God's hand. The same God who picked up a shepherd boy and turned him into a king is the same God who will lift you up in due season. Maybe you feel hidden in your job, right? In your ministry, in your calling, or even in your own home. But I want you to remember this: God's eyes never leave His chosen. He knows your name, right? He knows the work you've done in secret. He knows the tears you've cried when no one else was watching, right? And He will reward the faithfulness that no one else applauded. When God brings you into the light, right, it won't just be to show others who you are. It will be to show them who He is. Every hidden season has a purpose. Every quiet prayer has been heard. Every unseen act of faith has been recorded in heaven's book. So hold your head high, keep serving, keep praying, keep believing. You may be hidden from people, right? But you are held by God. He has not forgotten you. He's preparing your stage. And when the curtain rises, when your name is called, right, the world will see what heaven saw all along, that you were chosen, anointed, and appointed for such a time as this. When others said you were overlooked, right, heaven said you were in training. When others said you were forgotten, God said, right, you're next. And when the moment comes, and it will come, no one will be able to deny that it was the hand of Almighty God that brought you out of the shadows and into His marvelous light. Right? There are moments in life when the waiting becomes heavy, when the prayers we've prayed for years seem to echo back in silence, and when hope feels like a distant dream, we ask ourselves, God, have you heard me? Have you forgotten me? But the truth is, this delay is not denial. Right? God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't match our own. What feels like delay to us is often divine alignment to Him. Right? Every person used mightily by God walked through seasons of waiting. Abraham waited 25 years for the promise of a son. Right? Joseph waited over a decade in prison before his dream came to pass. Even Jesus waited 30 years before stepping into His public ministry. God never rushes purpose, right? Because preparation always precedes promotion. What you call waiting is what God calls working. When God delays something, it's not to discourage you, it's to develop you. We live in a world that wants everything now, instantly, effortlessly, right? But God's kingdom doesn't operate on human impatience. He takes time to shape character, to build trust, to strengthen faith, right? He's not only preparing the blessing for you, He's preparing you for the blessing. Because if the door opened too soon, it could crush you instead of bless you, right? Think of a child asking for the keys to a car before they're ready to drive. The parent isn't saying no forever. They're saying not yet. That's how God works with His children. He loves you too much to give you what you're not ready to carry. Separate. Sometimes His greatest mercy is not yet. There's a story in the Gospel of John about Lazarus. Jesus loved him deeply, yet when He heard Lazarus was sick, right, He stayed where he was for 2 more days. To those watching, it seemed like delay. To Mary and Martha, it felt like denial. But Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. It is for God's glory." When He finally arrived, Lazarus had been dead 4 days. The situation looked hopeless, but that's when Jesus said, "Lazarus, come forth." If He had come earlier, they would have known Him as a healer, right? But because He waited, they came to know Him as the resurrection and the life, right? God's delays are never about indifference. They are about revealing a greater dimension of His power, right? Maybe your Lazarus has been in the tomb a long time. Your dream, your health, your marriage, your purpose. You've prayed, you've fasted, you've believed, right? And nothing seems to move. But don't give up. Just because God hasn't answered yet doesn't mean He won't, right? Sometimes He allows situations to reach their lowest point so that when He turns them around, there will be no question who did it, right? Faith is trusting God's heart when you can't trace His hand. It's believing that He's working behind the curtain even when the stage looks empty. When Joseph sat in that Egyptian prison forgotten by the cupbearer, he could have lost hope, right? But in a single day, one conversation with Pharaoh, God turned the prisoner into the prime minister. That's how suddenly divine timing can shift. While you wait, keep your heart right. Waiting time is not wasted time if you're growing in grace, deepening your roots in faith, and learning to rest in God's plan. Don't let bitterness or discouragement poison your spirit. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't dig it up the next day to check if it's growing, right? You trust the process. You water it, you protect it, you wait for it to sprout. God's promises are the same way, right? They are seeds that grow underground long before you see any sign of life. There will come a day when everything will make sense. The delays, the detours, right? The disappointments, you'll look back and realize that God's wait was a shield protecting you, not a wall rejecting you. He knows the right moment to lift you up, the right connection to bring into your path, the right door to open. The danger in delay is despair, but despair has no place in the heart of a believer. You serve a God who never fails to keep His word. The Bible says, "Though it tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay." What God promised you is on its way. So if your prayer hasn't been answered yet, pray. Don't stop praying. If the dream hasn't come alive, don't stop believing. Keep your faith steady and your heart humble. Right? God is not ignoring you. He's aligning everything so that when the blessing arrives, it will be undeniable that it came from Him. Right? The same God who called you hasn't changed His mind about you. The same God who spoke the promise still plans to fulfill it. His delay is your preparation. His silence is your strengthening, and when the time is right, He will do what only He can do, suddenly, powerfully, unmistakably. So don't let delay make you doubt. Let it deepen your dependence. Because when God finally moves, the years of waiting will make sense in a single moment. Delay is not denial, it is divine timing in disguise. There are times in life when everything you hoped for seems to crumble before your eyes. The dream you once held close slips through your fingers. The relationships you trusted collapse, and the path you thought was straight suddenly turns into a maze of confusion and loss. It's in those moments we wonder, why God? Why did this happen to me? But what we don't see in the moment of pain is that every setback carries the seed of a comeback. God never wastes a wound. He never allows pain without purpose. What looks like a detour to you may be the divine route to your destiny. When Joseph was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, it was not just betrayal, it was preparation. When he was sold into slavery, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. And when he was locked in a prison, it wasn't punishment, it was positioning. God was writing a story that Joseph couldn't see yet. The same hands that bound him in chains would one day lift him to rule over a nation. Every step down was actually a step toward the throne. You see, God allows setbacks not to destroy you, but to develop you. If life were always easy, your faith would never grow. A seed must be buried before it can break through the soil and bear fruit. In the same way, your faith must go through the dark before it can see the light. The setback is where your faith learns to stand when everything else falls. Think about the cross. To the disciples, it was the ultimate defeat. Their teacher, their hope, their Messiah hung dying before their eyes. It was the darkest moment in history. But what they didn't realize was that the cross was not the end. It was the beginning. The place of apparent loss became the very place of eternal victory. The grave that looked like finality became the doorway to resurrection. That's how God works. He turns crucifixions into resurrections, defeats into testimonies, pain into purpose. Maybe you've lost a job, a relationship, an opportunity, or even your confidence. Maybe the enemy has whispered, "You're done. It's over." But let me tell you something, God's story doesn't end in the pit, the prison, or the cross. The story always ends in victory for those who trust Him. You may be down, but you are not out. You may be broken, but you are not beyond repair. The same God who raised Jesus from the dead is still in the business of raising dead situations today. Sometimes God allows everything around you to fall apart so you can see that He alone is your foundation. You don't need to fear failure when you know that God holds the final word. The very thing that was meant to destroy, you can become the very thing that defines your destiny. When the enemy plots for your downfall, God rewrites the plan for your promotion. What the enemy meant for evil, Joseph said, God meant for good. Every comeback begins with surrender, You have to let go of what was to receive what's coming. As long as you're clinging to the past, God can't place the future in your hands. Joseph had to forgive his brothers before he could lead them. You too may have to release the bitterness, the disappointment, the why me questions before you can walk in the next chapter. God's power flows through a surrendered heart, Don't let your setback convince you that God has changed His mind about your purpose. The delay is temporary, but the destiny is eternal. Brett, you may not understand the pain now, but one day you will look back and see that every closed door was mercy, every loss was protection, Brett, and every delay was divine timing. If you're walking through a valley, keep going. Don't pitch your tent there. Valleys are not permanent. They are passages, right? There is a mountaintop on the other side. You will not stay where you are forever. The God who brought you this far has not brought you here to abandon you. Separate. He's still writing your story, and the next chapter will be your greatest yet. When God turns your situation around, it won't just bless you, it will bless others. Right. Joseph's comeback saved not only himself, but an entire nation. Your comeback will be a testimony that strengthens those watching you. People will see that it wasn't your strength that lifted you. It was God's grace. So lift your head. The pit was not your grave. It was your classroom. Or the prison was not your punishment. It was your preparation. And the pain was not your ending. It was your beginning. Right? The God who specializes in resurrection is breathing new life into your situation right now. What looks dead will live again. What seems lost will be found. Right. What the enemy meant to bury you with will be the very thing God uses to lift you higher. Your setback is the setup for a divine comeback. And when God brings you out, right, you won't just come out the same. You'll come out stronger, wiser, and ready for the destiny He always had in mind. So keep your faith steady and your heart open for it. The God who began a good work in you will complete it, and when He does, every eye will see that it was His power that turned your setback into your comeback, right? There comes a time in every believer's life when it seems that God has forgotten the urgency of your situation. You've prayed, you've fasted, right? You've wept before the Lord, and yet nothing seems to shift. The storm keeps raging, the mountain refuses to move, and your faith begins to feel fragile, right? But what we must remember is that God may not move when we expect Him to, but when He moves suddenly. He is the God of divine surprises, right? The master of the midnight turnaround. When His moment arrives, everything can change in an instant. All throughout Scripture, right, we see that God often works in sudden and unexpected ways. In one night, right, the Israelites who had been slaves in Egypt for 400 years walked out free men and women carrying the wealth of their oppressors. In one night, right, Daniel went from a condemned man in the lion's den to being honored by a king. In one moment, right, a fisherman named Peter went from an ordinary worker to a preacher whose words would change the world. When God decides it's time, right, He doesn't need permission from your circumstances or your enemies. He simply speaks and everything shifts. We serve a God who specializes in sudden miracles. Brett, He doesn't need a committee, a warning, or a calendar date. He can step into your situation tonight, this very moment, right, and do what years of effort could not accomplish. In John 11, Jesus stood outside the tomb of Lazarus. To everyone around Him, it was too late. The man had been dead 4 days, the stone was sealed, and the stench of decay filled the air. Yet Jesus called out, "Lazarus, come forth!" And in a moment, Brett, death was defeated and life returned. That's the power of a sudden miracle when time, logic, and circumstance all bow before the authority of God. Pray. Sometimes God allows the delay so that His sudden intervention brings greater glory. If Jesus had come when Lazarus was only sick, they would have seen Him as a healer. Right. But because He came after Lazarus had died, they saw Him as the resurrection and the life. In the same way, separate. The Lord may allow your situation to reach a breaking point so that when He moves, there's no doubt it was His hand and not human help. Right. God waits until the Red Sea is right in front of you and Pharaoh's army is behind you, then He parts the waters. Right. He waits until the oil in the widow's jar is almost gone. Then He multiplies it. He waits until Gideon's army is too small to win. Then He gives the victory. Right. He does this so that when your miracle comes, you'll know it wasn't by your might, nor by your power, but by His Spirit. You may not see anything changing, but heaven is already moving. God's miracles often happen in the unseen before they manifest in the visible. He works in the background, arranging hearts, right? Opening doors and aligning timing. Then suddenly, when everything is in place, he reveals what he's been doing all along. That's why the Bible says, right, in due season you shall reap if you faint not. The due season is not your calendar, it's God's. When your moment comes, it won't take long. In Acts 12, Peter was chained in prison between two soldiers, surrounded by guards. But that night, as the church prayed, an angel of the Lord appeared, prayed. And suddenly the chains fell off, the doors opened, and Peter walked free. That's how your God operates. Suddenly, powerfully, decisively, right? You may be facing a closed door today, a door of opportunity, of healing, of reconciliation. You've knocked, you've waited, and nothing's moved. Don't give up, because God has the master key. He doesn't have to pick the lock or ask for permission. He speaks, and the door swings wide open. And when it happens, right, it will happen quickly. That's why you must stay ready, stay faithful, stay expectant. Because when the miracle comes, right, there won't be time to prepare. It will happen in the blink of an eye. Your responsibility is to believe, even when the evidence says otherwise. Keep praying, right, even when the heavens seem silent. Keep trusting, even when it hurts to hope. The same God who turned water into wine in a moment can turn your situation around today. You don't need to know how, just trust who. One moment of divine intervention can erase years of struggle, right? One word from God can open doors that generations couldn't open. One touch from His hand can heal what medicine cannot. That's the power of sudden miracles. So don't despair if your life seems stuck. Don't give in to fear if nothing seems to move, because the God who moves suddenly is not finished with you yet, right? In one moment, He can restore what was lost, redeem what was broken, and revive what was dead. You might have been waiting for a long time, right? But the delay does not mean denial. It means preparation for a greater glory. Hold on, because the same God who moved for Moses, Daniel, and Lazarus will move for you. Separate. He's setting the stage right now for your suddenly. And when it happens, you won't have to force it. You'll simply stand in awe and say, right, surely the Lord has done this. And it is marvelous in our eyes. There will always be people who doubt you, who look at your life and see nothing special, right? Who whisper behind closed doors that you'll never amount to much. Some will measure your worth by where you came from, what you've done, or how far you've fallen, right? But what they don't know is that God delights in using the unlikely to do the impossible. When His favor rests upon your life, right, He will lift you in ways that no man can explain. And when He does, it will leave everyone who doubted you in holy astonishment. Right? God's favor has a way of silencing critics without you ever saying a word. You see, the favor of God is not something that can be earned, bought, or explained. Right? It is the unmerited kindness of a sovereign God who chooses to bless whom He pleases. When His hand is on your life, it doesn't matter who's against you. Right? His favor will open doors that no man can shut and close doors that no man can open. The psalmist said, right, He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. That means your blessing is not hidden from your critics. It's displayed right in front of them so that all can see what the Lord has done. Brett, think of Joseph. The same brothers who betrayed him, sold him, and lied about him had to one day stand before him and beg for food. Brett, when they realized the powerful ruler before them was the brother they had tried to destroy, their hearts were filled with fear. But Joseph didn't need revenge. He had revelation. He said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." That's what divine favor does. Right. It takes the stones others throw and turns them into stepping stones for your destiny. God's favor doesn't remove opposition. It exposes His glory through it. Right. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den because he refused to bow to man, but God's favor shut the mouths of the lions. The next morning, right, the same king who signed Daniel's death order proclaimed a decree honoring Daniel's God. When God favors you, right, those who once opposed you will have to acknowledge His power in your life. Sometimes, right, God allows you to face rejection so that no one else can take credit for your success. If everyone had helped you, supported you, or celebrated you, that they could claim a piece of your victory. But when God blesses you in spite of who didn't believe in you, right, there will be no doubt that it was His hand alone that lifted you. The very people, they'll never make it, will have to admit, surely, right, the Lord is with them. Don't waste your time trying to prove yourself to people. You don't have to chase validation when you carry divine favor. When God decides to promote you, He will do it in such a way that even your enemies will have to witness it. They may not like it, but they won't be able to deny it. Right? Favor speaks louder than explanation. David experienced this when he faced Goliath. The soldiers, his own brothers, and even the king doubted him. He was too young, right, too inexperienced, too unqualified in their eyes. But when he stepped onto that battlefield with faith in his heart, one stone brought down a giant, right? And from that moment, the same people who once dismissed him began to sing, Saul has slain his thousands, right? But David his tens of thousands. The hand of God turned a shepherd into a warrior and a warrior into a king. That's what favor does. It changes the narrative. It takes you from overlooked to chosen, from forgotten to celebrated. The world calls it luck, but you'll know it's grace. When God begins to lift you, stay humble, right? Remember that the same God who elevated you did it not to glorify you, but to glorify Himself through you, right? Your success will not be your applause. It will be your testimony. And when people ask, how did you get here? How did you overcome all that? You'll be able to say, it wasn't me, right? It was the hand of God. That's why you must resist the urge to fight your critics or prove your worth. Let your faithfulness be your defense, right? And let God's favor be your vindication. The truth is, the people who counted you out didn't know who was counting you in. Haven had already written your name on its agenda. No amount of gossip, jealousy, or opposition can erase what God has ordained, right? You don't need to fight for recognition. God Himself will be your advocate. So keep walking in obedience. Keep trusting when it doesn't make sense, right? Keep doing right when others do you wrong, because soon God will turn the page. And when He does, He will set you in places you didn't qualify for, right? Surround you with opportunities you didn't ask for, and pour out blessings you didn't expect. And when that day comes, don't gloat, right? Don't point fingers at those who doubted you. Instead, let your success point to God's faithfulness, right? Because the purpose of His favor is not to make you famous, it's to make Him known. And when the world sees what He's done for you, right, they'll know that the same God who lifted you can lift them too. So don't be discouraged by those who underestimate you, right? God's favor will soon speak on your behalf. And when it does, every eye will see that it was not your doing, separate, but the divine hand of a faithful God who turns ordinary people into living testimonies of His extraordinary grace, right? There comes a point in every believer's journey when the night feels long and the promise seems far away. You've prayed, you've stood in faith, right? You've held on to every word God has spoken, yet nothing seems to change. The temptation is to give up, to assume that maybe God has forgotten it, or that perhaps you misunderstood His plan. But I want to tell you today, you must stay faithful because the best is yet to come. The story is not over. Right? The same God who began a good work in you is still writing your final chapter, and it will end in victory if you don't let go. Right? Faithfulness is the bridge between the promise and the fulfillment. Many people start strong, filled with zeal and excitement, but few finish well, right? The secret of those who finish strong is not talent, not influence, and not luck. It's faithfulness. It's the quiet strength that says, right, even when I can't see the way, I'll keep trusting. Even when the door stays closed, I'll keep knocking. Even when the ground feels dry, I'll keep sowing. God honors the heart that refuses to quit. In the book of Galatians, the Apostle Paul reminds us, do not grow weary in well-doing, right? For in due season you shall reap if you faint not. Notice that he said, if you faint not. That means your breakthrough isn't determined by how fast you move, right, but by how long you stand. The enemy's greatest weapon is discouragement, right, because he knows he can't stop God's plan. He can only try to convince you to stop believing in it. Look at Noah. He built an ark when there was no sign of rain, right, when people laughed at him, mocked him, and called him a fool. Yet day after day, plank after plank, he stayed faithful to what God told him to do. Right. And when the floods came, his faithfulness became his salvation. The same will be true for you. Right. What looks foolish now will make perfect sense when the rain begins to fall. Faithfulness is not glamorous. It's not loud or celebrated. Right. It's showing up to pray when no one else is praying. It's staying kind when you're mistreated. It's forgiving again and again when you could easily walk away. It's trusting God's character even when you don't understand his methods. But make no mistake, every act of obedience, every unseen moment of faith, right, is recorded in heaven. Nothing you do for God ever goes unnoticed. Sometimes we think faithfulness means doing big things for God, right? But it's often about being consistent in the small things. David didn't start on the throne. He started in the pasture, right, caring for sheep no one else wanted to tend. Yet it was in that field that God saw a heart he could trust. If David had despised his small assignment, right, he would have missed his divine appointment. The same is true for you. Stay faithful where you are, and God will take care of where you're going, right? Maybe you've been praying for years for a healing, a loved one's salvation, a door to open, and you're tired. But remember, right, God never forgets a prayer that's been prayed in faith. Separate. Sometimes the answer takes time because he's aligning more than just your life. He's aligning everything connected to it, right? The moment you stop believing might be the very moment before your breakthrough. Don't give up before the miracle comes. And when life grows dark, right, remember that dawn always follows night. The enemy wants you to think the silence means God has left you, right? But silence often means he's working on something too big to reveal just yet. He's writing a story that will make sense only when you see the whole picture, right? Hold on to hope. Not the hope that everything will go your way, but the hope that God's way is always better. When you stay faithful through the fire, right, you come out refined, not burned. When you stay faithful through the storm, right, you discover that the winds that were meant to destroy you only carried you closer to your destiny. Every trial is temporary, but every lesson is eternal, right? That's why the saints of old could sing in prison, praise in persecution, and rejoice in weakness, because they knew that no matter how dark the present looked, right, the best was always ahead. You may not be where you want to be right now, but thank God you're not where you used to be. The same hand that brought you this far will carry you forward. God doesn't start something he won't finish. You may feel like your story is stalled, but God is still turning the pages. The ink has not dried yet, so don't stop praying. Don't stop believing. Don't stop sowing seeds of faith, love, and obedience. Stay steady because your harvest is on its way. When the time is right, God will reveal why the waiting was necessary. You'll look back and realize that every tear, right, every delay, and every disappointment was leading you to a greater joy. And when the fulfillment comes, right, you won't just thank God for the blessing, you'll thank him for the process that made you ready for it. Stay faithful, my friend, right? The God who promised is faithful. The night may be long, but the morning is coming. And when it comes, right, you'll see that the best, God's best, was not behind you. It was waiting just ahead.